Why are some people so upset about the trailer for the new Resident Evil movie? And why do other people think it could be the best video game adaptation yet? In case you didn't know, a trailer was recently released for a new Resident Evil movie written and directed by Zach Cregger.
Sorry.
And the response was really divisive. On one hand, you have a lot of fans of the Resident Evil video games frustrated because they feel that Hollywood has never really given them a loyal or direct adaptation of the story from the games. On the other hand, you have people who are fans of Cregger's previous horror films saying that he might be the best person to deliver a truly great video game movie. Now, this might just sound like fanboys arguing, but I really think there's a complex layer of elements to the way this movie is already being received before it's even out. The first Resident Evil game was released in 1996 on the original PlayStation. The story follows Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine as part of a task force called STARS, or Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Their team is attacked by a pack of diseased dogs. They take shelter in a mysterious nearby mansion only to find out that it's filled with zombies. Resident Evil is often considered to be one of the most influential games ever made. It set the standard for the survival horror genre by forcing players to explore the mansion with limited health and resources. And a lot of people think of Resident Evil as a zombie franchise, but zombies barely scratch the surface of the kind of horrific creatures players have to go up against in every Resident Evil game. From your standard zombies, to mutant alligators, to much worse. And Zach Cregger's Resident Evil movie is definitely not the first time the games have been adapted.
She may be our only way out of here.
Resident Evil.
You're all going to die.
The first film was released in 2002 and was successful enough to launch a franchise that had a total of 6 movies. Despite that, fans of the video game agree this was not even close to a loyal adaptation of the games. The longer the story progressed, the more it went away from the source material. And Alice, the main character throughout the series, was made up entirely for the movie. The next attempt came in 2021 with Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City. Director Johannes Roberts intended for this to be a much more loyal adaptation of the games than the previous films. The movie combined the stories from the first and second games, so it's pretty jam-packed with characters and plot. The movie also suffered from several rounds of budget cuts that resulted in missing scenes and monsters along with a smaller CGI budget. Fans typically view this as more loyal than the first series, but generally agree the execution didn't match the quality they hoped for. Only a year later, in 2022, Netflix released a series that reversed course and was even more of a loose adaptation than the first movie series. Overall, the series was pretty poorly received and never got a second season. So we can see why fans have been so disappointed. They've wanted to see an adaptation that's both loyal to the games but also isn't treated like a low-budget cash grab. But this disappointment isn't really new for video game fans in general. Even though dozens of video games were adapted into movies through the 90s and 2000s, none of them saw huge success. Some of them have now become cult classics, but all of them either failed at the box office or with how audiences received them, or both.
Mother. You're alive. Too bad you will die.
But just in the last few years, things have started to shift. As video games have progressed their narrative ability over the years, Hollywood has also started to realize they can be valid source material worthy of bigger budgets and talent-driven adaptations.
Yeah, what if it makes the moon up on high, more than just a light in the sky? If it keeps...
But there are still a lot of adaptations that have struggled to hit the mark with fans, like Halo, Uncharted, and Borderlands. Video game fans often claim they just want direct adaptations of the stories from the games. And in their defense, there have been a lot of adaptations that have changed the source material so much that you have to wonder why they chose to adapt it at all. For instance, in its first 2 seasons, the Halo series told a story that was unrecognizable to Halo fans. The first game begins with aliens attacking a human ship, forcing it to land on a mysterious ring world known as Halo, but the series didn't even take its characters to a Halo world until the end of Season 2. But does an adaptation have to literally recreate the original story to be good? No. Fallout has been very well received and does not directly adapt a story from any Fallout game. And that's exactly what Zach Cregger is doing in his Resident Evil movie. Cregger has said that his story is following an entirely new character within the world of the games, and that it likely occurs around the same time as Resident Evil 2, which is when there's an outbreak of the virus in Raccoon City. And the truth is, direct adaptations are not always the answer. The Last of Us is a big budget series that serves as a direct adaptation of the events of the game. But if you asked any fans of the games if the TV series feels like the experience of playing The Last of Us, my guess is they would say no. Video games really are an entirely different medium from movies and TV, because a massive part of the storytelling is your involvement as the player. Even if you don't control every choice the character makes, the experience of inhabiting the character through gameplay drastically affects the way you experience the story. And in that way, gameplay becomes a form of storytelling that film and TV adaptations cannot replicate. Not to mention that it has to condense the story into a more linear format. In Season 2 of The Last of Us, one of the common criticisms was that characters are often saying exactly how they feel in dialogue.
So we're having
as opposed to the game where the storytelling is more nuanced because it has time to breathe over the course of both cutscenes and gameplay.
I think I'm pregnant. What are we supposed to do now?
It's definitely possible that a different strategy could have been used to still make a direct adaptation, but there's no easy trick for it. On one hand, if everything is going to be the exact same, why tell the story over again? But if you change it too much and it no longer resembles the source material, that defeats the purpose of an adaptation to begin with. If you read some of the comments under the new Resident Evil trailer, you'll see that some people are convinced that this new movie is just a generic zombie story with the Resident Evil name slapped on it for a cash grab. But if we look at how Resident Evil games have evolved and the type of filmmaker Zach Cregger is, I think we can see that may not be the case. Resident Evil 4 was released in 2005 and alongside the original is considered a historically influential game. It was still horror, but was starting to move more into the action genre. Because the game was received so well, the 5th and 6th games also became more action-oriented. But after the 6th game wasn't as well received, the franchise did a reset. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard released in 2017. It switched to a first-person perspective, which hadn't been done in Resident Evil before. But it paired really well with the horror elements as the gameplay reverted to its survival horror roots by bringing back limited resources and inventory. The protagonist was an entirely new character that was essentially a normal guy caught up in a crazy situation. And I think that's the spirit that Zach Cregger is bringing to his adaptation of Resident Evil. If you've seen Barbarian and Weapons, you'll know that one of the things Cregger does well is defying expectations. In Barbarian, the story presents itself as a tense thriller about trusting strangers. But as soon as the characters head into the basement, they discover something shocking and it becomes an entirely different story. Weapons also presents a mystery that could go in a lot of directions. It lands on a concept that feels familiar, but was put into a context that made it feel new and interesting. Both of his movies have been extremely well received by critics and audiences, and Weapons even won an Academy Award for supporting actress. Whether or not you personally find value in those things is beside the point, because Hollywood sees value in those things. So when the studio hired Zach Cregger, a director who is rapidly rising in popularity for making original and unique movies that are Oscar quality, you know they're taking the project seriously because that's an investment. But even if Zach Cregger didn't have those credentials, the spirit of the Resident Evil games is absolutely on display in the trailer. The first thing the character does when he goes into the house is start searching the drawers for resources. And when he looks into his weapon only to see that he has no ammo is a feeling every Resident Evil fan should know. Then we see him trying to get a set of keys in a scary situation. In the games, you're constantly having to go find some item clear across the map so you can open a door or start a car to escape the area. And in that process, you always encounter some new terrifying creature. And as the story progresses, you always shift from fighting standard zombie enemies to increasingly difficult, scarier, more mutated creatures. And the fact that this new character is a normal person instead of an elite agent like Leon Kennedy or one of the other famous game characters shouldn't feel all that surprising since the game had us play as Ethan Winters in Resident Evil 7. Telling a new character story within the world of the games is not just a strategy that worked for the Fallout adaptation, it's exactly what the games themselves did with the reset that began with Resident Evil 7. So in my humble opinion, the trailer we've seen is not out of line with the game series or good adaptations of games in any way. It represents a deliberate choice by a filmmaker with a distinct style to bring the feeling and world of the games to life in cinema by telling a story that reflects the experience of the games. We won't know if he succeeded in doing that until the movie comes out, but I definitely think this has a chance to set a new standard for video game adaptations. But I'd love to hear what you think, so let me know. Unless you're going to complain about the fact that it's snowing in the trailer even though it wasn't snowing in the game. If you're actually concerned about that, I think this is all a lost cause for you.